Hello, Lower Fives, and welcome to the second video of week 6 of our online programming course. And here we're going to start looking at arrays of objects. And I think this is quite a long chapter, but I don't think we need to spend too much time on it because by now you should have a thorough, solid understanding of how arrays work. And now all we're going to be doing is instead of storing an int in an array, we're going to store an object. Technically, we've already done arrays of objects, because we've had arrays of strings. And a string is an object. However, specifically here, I think we're going to be creating our own objects to store in an array. And that is why I didn't go into parallel arrays in any detail, because if you want to store a person's name and their age and their address and the house they're in, then rather than creating 4 arrays, we'd just create an object person which has all of that information, and then have a single array of persons. And then it's easier to sort them, it's easier to delete them, and so forth. So I can't see any reason for you to ever use a parallel array. Perhaps if you just had 2 values, you might not use you might use a parallel array, but certainly I can't remember the last time I've did something like that. Okay, so let's take a look at this. A class to manipulate arrays of type string. I don't think we're going to do something like that. Should the fields be static or non-static? So static fields would not make sense because they'd just be shared by all objects of the class. And so once again, if you're more often than not, your variables that you're going to be creating in all of your classes will be non-static, because the whole reason we're creating an object is because we want to have multiple things like that. There are a couple of things where you might have a couple of static objects. So for example, one commonly used example that you'd find somewhere is if we wanted to keep count of how many of those objects had been created, not necessarily put into array or something, you might have a static count, and then each time in your constructor, each time you create an object, you increment count, and each time you destroy the object, you decrement count. So I think I'm going to skip through. We're not going to do this. So you need to do a constructor first, but that's all old news. Here they're reading something in from file, but it's just a bit boring. Accessors and mutator methods, we've covered these in classes. A toString method, very important. Every time you create a class, you should be creating a toString. So I'm not going to go through that. Testing, incredibly important. If you look at all of that code there, and now they're only starting to test, I think that's a terrible idea. I always think you should test your code right from the beginning. Then they created a display method. Not the world's most exciting. This is literally just a repeat of what we've been doing. Insert. I think you shift right, put it is the combination of shift right and actually put it in. Sort, you know what it is. Okay. This exercise would just have you doing something with int array, but I think that's boring, so we won't do that. Okay, I think read through this just a little bit more carefully. Saving an array of objects to a text file. So this is effectively, I think we covered writing to file, but if we haven't, you can just go through this. This is how you do it. So you basically create a print writer, and a print writer, when it's constructed, takes a file writer, which you just send a file name to. So it's the equivalent to when we're creating a scanner, and the scanner gets its parameter is a new file. So very, very similar idea. And then all you do is you literally print into that. That's how you create a text file. And then you do need to close the file over here. So if we look at this little paragraph, it's very important to close the file that is being written to, as this flushes the buffer in memory, sending all remaining data to the file. If you do not close an output file, data may get stuck in the buffer and may never be written to the file. So what happens there is that we obviously writing to a hard drive can be very slow, and you don't want that to stall the program. So often what will happen is, you'll say like println, and some of that will get buffered into memory. And as time goes by, as the CPU gets time and the hard drive has the time, it'll actually write it to the file. If you close this before everything's been written, then it just won't be written. But calling the .close, or sorry, if you like someone closed the program or whatever, it wouldn't happen. But calling .close sort of tells the CPU, okay, you need to actually write everything now, and that's what happens. Appending data to a file, so this is not hard at all. All that happens is you send a second parameter, the parameter true. So if you don't send if you send false, it's exactly the same as sending only one parameter, but you can also send a second parameter of true, and what this will happen is it'll put your data at the end of the file instead of at the beginning. Okay, so once again, we're going to take a brief detour from the syllabus before we carry on with arrays of objects. And the previous method, writing to a text file, is okay, but it's slow, and reading in from it is painful and so forth. So basically, what you're going to have to do, you create a whole print writer, so there's quite a bit of setup. And then basically what you need to do is you need to do a println for every single thing that we have there. And you also have to keep in mind that we can only print sort of like string data. So, and then what we'd have to do is we'd have to open up and read it back in, and we have to convert to int. I mean, certainly, I think you'll see that from we've read in from file before, and you have to sort of like read in the next int. So it's really, really slow and painful. So I think this you might find this very cool. Once again, you're not going to be doing your pracs like this, but very handy for pats or if you're doing something else. So what I've done here, I've created a class called student, and this is new. I don't think you've seen implements before. And basically, serializable is it allows your class to be streamed to and from the disk, which means basically you can save and write student objects to disk. And the only thing you really need that's different is this serial version UID. So it does have to be serial version UID. Everything else is just the same as we've done before. There's our class that we created. Something new, I'm using the local date class to store a birth date. It's a much more convenient way of storing dates than the method described in the textbook. Straightforward constructor, getter, setter for all of them, and then a toString. I literally just inserted code here, the automatic code. Then this is the streaming. So if you wanted to write this using a print writer, I'd have to set up a for loop that would go through, over here, just creating an array of 5 students. So if I wanted to do this using a print writer, I'd have to set up a for loop that's going to go through all 4 of the student arrays, and then for every single field, it's going to write that field to the print writer, and that's going to take ages. Or I suppose I could do this as one line of text, but then reading it in, I'm going to have to convert it, and it's going to be tricky. Whereas over here, if you have a look, so we just create this thing called a file output stream. It's a class in Java, and we just send the name of the file. You can make up your own. You can call it what you want. So you can make up your own extension. I did .arr because it's storing an array, and then you create an object output stream, which takes a file output stream as the parameter. Which again, this is very similar to things we've done. You can think of creating a file, and then our scanner takes a file. Then all you do is your object output stream, you just call the right object on the object, which in this case, I sent an entire array, a whole array of students, and then I just close. So writing it took one line, just your standard catch. And then reading in is just as great. So reading in, you once again create a file input stream, which just takes a parameter, and then an object input stream. And then literally all I do is I call read object. Now, read object returns an object. So you'll see if I don't have the cast, it's going to say, hey, that's an object, I can't convert it to student, but it will cast. Now, this is the one place where you have to have a bit of knowledge. So I need to know that this file contains a student array. Otherwise, I won't be able to cast it properly. And then that's it. It's in. There's my array. And so if we, okay, you can already see there's a bit of a test. Obviously, I test most of my code before I show it to you. But basically, if I run this, let's just close this. I had it open so you could see what it looks like, but let's close it. So I'm going to write to file. There we go. It wrote to file, and I can open that for you. It's on the desktop. Let me minimize this and all of this. And there we go. There it is. And I'm just going to open the edit with Notepad++. And you can see it there. You can actually see it's stored it in its own, in a format that it can read in properly. And you can see all the sort of the data there. And you can see it's stored all of the data about it. So it's like week6.students. It's got the package name. It stores everything about the object. And and that means then that, when I try and read it in, so over here, you run this. That's that whole object set. So if you are saving and loading in your PAT, this is 1 billion times easier than writing to a text file. And I think that makes a good place to stop.